This is the second part of the video about psychoanalytic criticism in Lois Tyson, and I ended the last one by saying, talking about some resources that writers have access to or can have access to when they write fiction. And this idea that writers have to be aware of what making their characters believable. Part of that actually has to do with Sigmund Freud, because Sigmund Freud's ideas are part of our culture. They are part of your thinking, even if you don't realize that they're part of your thinking, because they are part of Western culture. And by reading about psychoanalytic criticism, you will hopefully be able to make those connections and say, yeah, those are ideas that I've had, even if you haven't used the exact right term or analytical concept for the idea. Those are still ideas that you have had or that you know that other people have. Even if you don't agree with it all the time, you still, I imagine, will recognize that these ideas do exist in our culture and that they're quite common. Sigmund Freud was alive between 1856 and 1939, so into the modernist era. And he's what we call the father of classical psychoanalysis. Many object to Sigmund Freud today and to Freud's ideas today, but the thing is that one of the things that I like about Lois Tyson is that she points out things like Freud didn't mean for us to stop exploring these ideas, or that he said the final word on these ideas. He actually meant for us to continue to explore them and to revise and adapt his ideas as we gain more knowledge. And that is on page 12, at the top of page 12. And that's a really important idea, that Freud didn't mean for him to be the end of what we know about these things, and that he would be right about everything. He just gave us ideas to start with, to begin thinking with. Some of the things that you'll be reading about are general ideas about psychoanalytic criticism from Freud, and one is that we are created by our early childhood experiences and by our role in the family, or by the order in which we were born in the family and the role that we have played in our family of origin. Those are two very important ideas from Freud. But when you're going to be looking at that in relation to literature, it's not enough to say, oh, he's the second child or the first child or the last child. You have to know in classical psychoanalysis, what does it mean to have those roles? What kinds of behavior do those usually come with? And those are based on studies of thousands of people. And so a lot of it is quite reasonable, even if it's still not always true. They're quite it's not unusual, and there are reasons to start there in exploring a person's psyche and why they do the things they do. On page 12, she also says this: because the goal of psychoanalysis is to help us resolve our psychological problems, often called disorders or dysfunctions. Here again, terms, analytical terms, concepts. Disorders or dysfunctions, often called dysfunctions today. And what are they? Psychological problems or psychological challenges. And the focus is on, she says this, the focus is on patterns of behavior. So that, again, if you were to apply this to literature and you're looking at psychological dysfunction in Great Gatsby, then you're looking at patterns of behavior that the character exhibits and that the author has created in order to create the psyche of this character. And you say, you can evaluate and say, has the author done this in a credible way, or has the author created an interesting character because, yes, they conform in these ways, but they are different in these other ways. And so that's where analysis of these phenomena come into play. Another thing that she brings out is that Sigmund Freud, he talked about the existence of the unconscious, and the unconscious is not the subconscious. The unconscious is a part of the personality that is hidden from us, hidden from ourselves, and they are thoughts and ideas that we have about how the world works, but that we don't always realize that we have, but that still manage to run our lives. And so that idea about the unconscious is very important, because it is what drives us, what motivates us, and that's where he talks about drive. So that's an idea that's important as well, and you could look at the unconscious, the role of the unconscious in a novel. You could look at the role of the unconscious in an author's work. What are some ideas that seem to keep coming back, even though the author's writing about different things? Certain ideas in certain situations will keep coming back again and again, and that's also to perform a psychoanalytical analysis of literature. Okay, this is the end of part 2. I'm going to do one more part for this brief look at Tyson's chapter on psychoanalytic criticism.